The Galactic Empire had always been known for its immense power, stretching across countless star systems. Its fleet of starships was unmatched, and its soldiers were trained from birth to serve with absolute loyalty. The Empire's leadership prided itself on being fearless, on never hesitating when it came to expanding its dominion. But even the mightiest empires could stumble when faced with the unknown. And in this case, the unknown was Terran space, a region far from the Empire's central worlds, but still strategically important. It all began with reports from scouts and distant colonies that patrolled the borders of the galaxy. These scouts were highly trained, equipped with the latest sensors. Their sole purpose was to detect any anomalies, strange signals, or potential threats lurking in unexplored territories. Over weeks and months, they began sending increasingly urgent messages back to the Emperor and the Council of Ministers. The first few reports were dismissed as routine data anomalies. The scouts had detected unusual energy readings and strange fluctuations in space near the Terran systems. But the Empire was confident that these were either natural phenomena or minor disturbances caused by cosmic storms. As time went on, the reports grew more concerning. The scouts observed unusual movement patterns, not of ships but of strange energy waves that seemed almost alive. Entire sectors of space appeared to be shifting, as if reacting to something unseen. Some scouts even reported strange formations that didn't match any known technology. These formations seemed deliberate, almost like a trap designed to confuse intruders. But instead of taking these warnings seriously, the Empire's leaders grew impatient. They had already made plans to expand into Terran space. To them, hesitation was weakness, and weakness could invite rebellion from their own governors or inspire rival empires to challenge them. Advisors and scientists pleaded with the Emperor, explaining that Terran space might not be empty or undefended. They warned that ignoring these early signs could lead to disaster. One particularly senior advisor presented a detailed analysis, showing patterns that indicated intelligent control over the strange phenomena. The advisor argued that these were not natural events and that the Terrans might possess technology far beyond what the Empire had anticipated. But the Emperor was unconvinced. His confidence was rooted in decades of conquest. In battles where every enemy had eventually fallen to the Empire's superior fleet and advanced weapons, to him, the idea that a mere human civilization could pose a threat was laughable. Meanwhile, scouts continued their work, becoming increasingly desperate. Some began to risk their own lives to send data back, reporting sudden surges of energy that interfered with communications, strange gravitational waves that altered the paths of asteroids, and even sudden disappearances of scouting vessels in sectors where no known threat existed. Every time the warnings came in, the Emperor and his generals reviewed them briefly, nodded, and then set them aside. They continued with their plans, confident that the humans were not prepared for a fleet of the Empire's size. The Empire's preparations were massive and thorough. Entire shipyards worked around the clock to construct new starships, repair old ones, and stockpile weapons, fuel, and supplies. Generals plotted the invasion in meticulous detail, calculating optimal paths for the fleet to enter Terran space, predicting the responses of the humans based on their limited intelligence, and preparing contingencies for minor resistance. In the council chambers, maps were spread across enormous holographic tables, showing the Terran systems in grids, with arrows indicating the Empire's anticipated movements. The mood was one of triumph and inevitability. No one questioned whether the Terrans might be more advanced than assumed, because that idea seemed impossible to them. Even the citizens of the Empire were unaware of the warnings. Propaganda emphasized that Terran space was a barren region, sparsely populated and insignificant, waiting only to be absorbed into the Empire's glorious territory. Stories of scouts detecting strange phenomena were twisted into tales of heroic explorers, bravely reporting nothing to fear so that the Empire could expand safely. The entire system of communication, from the Emperor down to the lowest officer, reinforced the belief that there was nothing in Terran space that could challenge the Empire. Yet, beneath the confidence and arrogance, there were subtle signs of unease. A few officers privately questioned the wisdom of ignoring repeated warnings. Some spoke in hushed tones about reports of strange energy fluctuations and missing scout ships. They wondered whether the Terrans might be more dangerous than anyone imagined. But speaking openly against the Emperor's decision was forbidden, and those who dared to voice concern risked their careers, or worse. Fear of reprisal ensured silence, allowing hubris to override caution. As the fleet grew ready for deployment, scouts continued to send increasingly urgent transmissions. They described phenomena that seemed to defy the laws of physics, areas where time appeared to behave differently, and regions of space where their sensors registered activity that no known species could produce. One scout captain even recorded a direct encounter with a Terran vessel that vanished almost as soon as it was detected, leaving no trace behind. The message ended with a desperate plea: do not enter Terran space without further study. Despite all of this, the Emperor and his advisors remained steadfast. They had conquered countless civilizations and had never faced defeat. The warnings were seen as exaggeration, a natural fear of the unknown. Plans proceeded without delay. Fleets were assigned commanders, supply lines were established, and invasion strategies were finalized. The Emperor addressed the commanders personally, telling them that victory was assured and that the Terrans were primitive and unprepared. The tone was dismissive, almost mocking, of anyone who suggested caution. In the midst of all this preparation, the scouts on the frontier continued their lonely work. They watched from a distance as the Empire's massive fleet gathered at staging points, ready to march into Terran space. Some tried to communicate the urgency one final time, using encrypted channels and coded messages, but the fleet's leadership refused to alter plans. The Empire's arrogance had reached its peak, and the scouts realized that no one was listening. They could only wait and hope that their warnings would prove unnecessary, but deep down, they feared the worst. Finally, the day arrived when the Empire's fleet was ready to move. Thousands of ships, carrying millions of soldiers, weapons and supplies, lined up in formation, their engines burning brightly as they prepared to enter the unknown territory. The Emperor gave his command, confident and unshakable, ignoring the hundreds of messages warning against the mission. The scouts watched in silence as the fleet began its journey into Terran space. Knowing that the warnings they had given and the anomalies they had observed might soon manifest in ways the Empire had never imagined, the atmosphere was tense, but not for the Emperor or his generals. Their arrogance and pride blinded them to the danger ahead. They saw the Terran systems as just another set of stars to conquer, underestimating the resilience, intelligence, and adaptability of the humans who lived there. The warnings, no matter how precise or urgent, were cast aside, treated as irrelevant noise in the face of the Empire's might, and so the Empire entered Terran space, confident, unafraid, and completely unprepared for the reality that awaited them. The warning signs, which had been clear and repeated, had been ignored. What seemed like a minor risk would soon become a trial unlike any the Empire had ever faced. The arrogance of power, the dismissal of caution, and the blind faith in their own superiority set the stage for a conflict that would test the Empire's very understanding of strength, intelligence, and survival. The scouts, watching from the shadows of the unexplored regions, could only hope that their warnings were wrong, but even they knew, deep inside, that ignoring the unknown was never wise. The Empire was about to learn that the universe held forces it could not command, and that even the most confident conquerors could face consequences when they ignored the signs that spoke clearly of danger. Asterisk, the Galactic. Empire's fleet moved forward into the uncharted regions of space, crossing vast stretches of emptiness that had never been fully explored. Thousands of ships, from massive battleships to smaller reconnaissance vessels, glided through the darkness with engines humming steadily. The commanders were confident, believing that their sheer numbers and advanced technology would make the journey smooth and uneventful. Yet the farther they traveled, the more subtle signs of something unusual began to appear. The Empire had thought they knew space, that every sector could be measured and predicted. But Terran space proved to be a puzzle that resisted their understanding. The first anomalies were small and easy to dismiss. Sensors began picking up minor fluctuations in gravitational fields, Ships reported strange electromagnetic interference that disrupted communication for brief moments. Navigators found that their carefully calculated coordinates seemed slightly off, requiring constant corrections. Some commanders assumed these were natural phenomena, perhaps remnants of cosmic storms or irregularities in star formation. Still, a quiet unease began to spread among the fleet's officers. Even the most confident generals noticed the patterns, though they did not yet see them as threatening. As the fleet continued, the anomalies became more pronounced. Large asteroid fields appeared in unexpected areas, forming barriers that seemed almost deliberate in their placement. Ships had to slow down, carefully maneuvering through rocks that seemed to shift just enough to make navigation difficult. The Empire's pilots, trained to handle any obstacle, struggled to maintain formation. Some vessels sustained minor damage, which was alarming given the advanced armor and shielding they possessed. Yet reports of these incidents were met with minimal concern by the High Command, who still believed that nothing in Terran space could truly challenge them. Strange. Energy surges began to interfere with long-range sensors. Systems that had always been reliable suddenly malfunctioned for minutes at a time, giving readings that made no logical sense. Navigation computers struggled to process the data, sometimes producing conflicting routes. Ships would appear in locations where no vessel had traveled, or signals would bounce in unpredictable ways. It's making it difficult to know exactly where each part of the fleet was. While some officers suggested caution, the generals insisted on pressing forward, their pride and arrogance outweighing reason. Retreat or hesitation was unthinkable, and the Emperor himself would have considered it a sign of weakness. In addition to these technical challenges, the fleet encountered unusual spatial phenomena. Clouds of energy that glowed faintly in colors unseen in other parts of the galaxy drifted in areas previously mapped as empty. These clouds seemed to shift and respond to the presence of the ships, moving in ways that made the Empire's navigators uneasy. Some reported that the clouds almost felt alive, as if they were observing and reacting to the fleet. Despite these unsettling occurrences, the commanders continued their march, confident that they're superior. Technology would protect them from any threat. The scouts at the front of the fleet faced the most danger. They moved ahead, tasked with mapping unknown sectors and reporting any potential obstacles or enemies. These ships often entered areas where the anomalies were strongest, risking total loss. Several scout vessels disappeared without explanation, leaving no debris behind, only faint traces on long-range sensors that quickly vanished. Each disappearance increased the tension among the remaining officers, but the High Command interpreted it as normal risk in unexplored regions, refusing to consider that something intelligent or hostile might be at work. Meanwhile, back on Terran space, scientists and military leaders were watching the Empire's approach with growing concern. Long-range telescopes and sensors picked up the movement of massive fleets entering their territory. Analysts noted unusual energy disturbances in space that correlated with the Empire's progress, suggesting that the humans might have an unseen influence on their own environment. Terran scientists worked tirelessly to understand these phenomena, conducting simulations and experiments to see how the anomalies could be controlled or leveraged in defense. They did not yet know exactly what the Empire would do, but preparation and knowledge gave them confidence. Within the Empire, minor panic began to surface among some of the mid-level officers. Reports from scouts and navigators painted a picture of space that defied expectations. Ships strayed off course despite precise calculations. Some systems acted unpredictably, and communication delays became longer and more frequent. Even the bravest pilots reported a growing sense of unease, as if the very fabric of space itself was resisting their presence. Rumors circulated in the fleet about vessels vanishing or returning with crews who claimed to have seen things beyond comprehension. Still, the generals refused to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, believing that fear and superstition were the cause of the reports. Tensions among the commanders grew. Some advocated for slower movement and more careful reconnaissance, suggesting that the fleet's pace should be adjusted to account for the unpredictable anomalies. Others argued that slowing down would give the Terrans time to prepare defenses, and that hesitation was unacceptable. Disagreements simmered in the command chambers, but pride and the desire to maintain appearances prevented any action. The Emperor's voice, carried through long-range channels, reminded everyone that doubt was dangerous, and that only through unwavering confidence could the Empire succeed. As the fleet approached the outer Terran systems, signs of intelligent activity became impossible to ignore. Certain regions of space seemed deliberately designed to challenge intruders. Sensor readings suggested the presence of artificial structures, but these structures did not resemble anything in the Empire's vast database. They seemed organic in design, almost as if they had grown naturally rather than being built. Ships attempting to scan these areas experienced sudden surges of interference, and some instruments recorded strange harmonics that had no known explanation. Navigators began to realize that Terran space was not only unexplored, was protected in ways the Empire had never encountered. Despite these mounting anomalies, the fleet continued forward. The Emperor's orders were clear. Terran space was to be entered, claimed, and subdued if necessary. No obstacle, no matter how strange, could justify retreat. The generals remained convinced that any resistance would be temporary, and that their superior numbers and firepower would ultimately overwhelm the Terrans. They still assumed that the humans were technologically inferior, relying on brute force rather than strategy or ingenuity. This assumption, they believed, made them invincible. But space itself seemed to challenge the Empire. Ships that tried to enter certain sectors found their engines responding sluggishly, or their shields flickering under pressure with no apparent cause. Some crews reported hearing strange sounds through the hull's vibrations, pulses, or low hums that seemed almost communicative. Attempts to trace these signals were often met with failure, leaving officers frustrated and uneasy. Even so, the Empire pressed on, determined to prove that nothing could stand in their way. As the fleet neared key Terran systems, scouts began to make direct observations of human technology. They saw signals and communications moving at speeds and using frequencies the Empire had never encountered. Sensors picked up structures and energy sources that seemed to defy conventional physics. Some vessels even observed small but precise defensive maneuvers that indicated a highly adaptive intelligence at work. The reports were remarkable, yet the High Command dismissed them as minor obstacles, assuming that humans could not possibly match the Empire in power. Throughout the journey, the scouts maintained a sense of awe and fear. They recognized that Terran space was not simply unknown, it was different, unpredictable, and possibly dangerous in ways that could not be anticipated. Some officers quietly worried that the Empire had underestimated the humans completely. Others, more arrogant or loyal, continued to believe in the inevitability of victory, thinking that no civilization could withstand the Empire's might for long. The tension between caution and confidence created an undercurrent of unease that ran through the fleet. By the time the fleet reached the edge of the central Terran systems, it had already experienced anomalies that no training or prior knowledge could explain. Ships were operating under stress, crews were fatigued from constant adjustments, and navigators had to work tirelessly to keep formations intact. Still, the Empire's leadership refused to consider turning back or altering their plans. Pride and hubris had blinded them to the possibility that the humans were not only aware of their approach, but actively preparing for it. The scouts sent their final pre-contact reports, describing strange energy patterns, subtle manipulations of space, and signs of intelligence that suggested the humans might have advanced defensive systems. The reports were marked urgent, but they did little to change the High Command's attitude. The Empire's journey into Terran space had already begun in earnest, and no warnings could halt their progress as the fleet moved forward. The contrast between confidence and uncertainty became stark. Officers who had once doubted nothing now experienced the first pangs of fear. Sensing that the anomalies were deliberate and controlled, the Empire's arrogance had driven them to ignore the subtle warnings. And now, they were entering a space that was alive in ways they could not understand. Unknown challenges awaited, and the humans, far from being primitive, were preparing to reveal just how formidable they could be. The journey into Terran space was no longer just a matter of navigation or logistics, it had become a test of perception, adaptability, and humility. The fleet that had once felt unstoppable now realized, at least subconsciously, that the warnings they had ignored were not baseless. The anomalies were just the beginning, prelude to the encounter that would challenge everything the Empire believed about power, intelligence, and control. The unknown stretched ahead, dark, vast, and filled with possibilities, and the Empire moved boldly into it. Unaware of the full scale of the trial that awaited them? Asterisk. When the Empire finally made visual contact with Terran space, the commanders expected little resistance. Their confidence had only grown over the long journey, reinforced by the belief that the humans were a primitive civilization, incapable of defending themselves against a fleet of the Empire's size and firepower. They imagined that their entry would be met with either surrender or token resistance, an easy conquest that would take little effort. But what they encountered was entirely unexpected, something that shook the confidence of even the most arrogant officers. The first glimpses of Terran defenses stunned the scouts. From orbit, they saw structures that did not match any known design in the Empire's databases. Massive energy grids hummed across strategic points, radiating controlled pulses that interfered with their sensors. Smaller mobile units moved with a precision that seemed almost instinctual, dodging detection and repositioning themselves in ways that the Empire's navigators could barely comprehend. It quickly became clear that the humans had not only prepared for this encounter, but had done so in ways that leveraged the very anomalies that had plagued the fleet during their journey. The initial engagement began with probes and scouting, ships sent ahead to test defenses. These vessels were met with electronic countermeasures that disabled communication links and scrambled sensor data. The Empire's advanced technology, normally superior in every environment, struggled to operate. Ships reported sudden bursts of energy that caused temporary system failures. Weapons locked onto invisible targets, only to find nothing there when they fired. Some probes vanished entirely, leaving no trace behind. Officers aboard the main fleet began to murmur about the strange effectiveness of human defenses. But the generals still insisted it was a temporary obstacle. As the fleet drew closer, human forces revealed their adaptive strategies. They used the terrain of space itself, asteroid belts, energy fields, and gravitational anomalies to their advantage, positioning their defenses in unpredictable ways. The Empire's long-range sensors often failed to detect units until they were almost within firing range. Every attempt to analyze or predict the humans' movements was met with sudden changes, forcing the Empire to constantly adjust plans. This was a level of adaptability the Empire had rarely seen. In previous campaigns, their enemies had predictable tactics, easily countered with sheer numbers. The humans, however, seemed to think differently, responding in ways that defied conventional logic. The first skirmishes highlighted the Terrans' ingenuity. Smaller human ships would appear in unexpected places, attacking with precision strikes before vanishing into the environment. Energy pulses disrupted the Empire's targeting systems, while larger Terran units absorbed damage that would have crippled any other civilization's ships. Despite the Empire's overwhelming superiority in firepower, the humans' ability to anticipate and react rendered many attacks ineffective. The fleet's confidence began to waver, as officers realized that brute strength alone would not guarantee victory. Morale among the fleet's crews started to shift. Soldiers who had boarded ships with the expectation of easy conquest now faced a reality that was far more dangerous. Reports of missing vessels, unexplained system failures, and elusive human units circulated rapidly. Rumors of entire squadrons being trapped in energy fields or disappearing completely spread through the ranks. Even the most loyal officers began to feel doubt, questioning whether the humans were truly as primitive as the Empire had assumed. Fear, previously hidden beneath layers of pride, started to creep into the hearts of those who had never known defeat. In the command chambers, debates grew heated. Some generals urged caution, proposing more reconnaissance before engaging in a full-scale attack. They pointed to the anomalies and adaptive strategies as evidence that the humans might be far more advanced than anticipated. Others argued that hesitation would be fatal, that showing doubt would embolden the Terrans and weaken the fleet's cohesion. The Emperor's voice, carried through the command channels, reinforced the notion that retreat or delay was unacceptable. Confidence and pride were demanded, even as evidence mounted that the humans posed a real and formidable threat. Attempts to use traditional tactics failed repeatedly. The Empire's fleets, accustomed to overwhelming firepower, found that many of their weapons were less effective than expected. Energy shields deployed by human units absorbed blasts that would have destroyed ordinary ships. The humans exploited weaknesses in the fleet's formation, attacking from unexpected angles and withdrawing before counterattacks could be organized. Each engagement provided the humans with opportunities to learn and adapt, while the Empire struggled to adjust. For the first time in many decades, the Empire's technology was matched in practical effectiveness. And that realization shook the foundation of their confidence. Even the most advanced AI and automated targeting systems aboard the Empire's ships struggled to cope with the unpredictability of Terran tactics. These systems, designed for precision and efficiency, were confused by sudden changes in position, invisible energy fields, and interference with sensor data. Engineers worked around the clock to recalibrate systems, but every adjustment seemed only to delay the next surprise. Officers who had previously relied on technology, above all else, realized that raw computing power could not anticipate the creativity and intuition displayed by the humans. Communication between ships became increasingly chaotic. Signal interference caused by human energy fields created delays and confusion. Orders were misinterpreted or lost entirely. Some ships moved out of formation, attempting to compensate for unexpected attacks, only to find themselves isolated and vulnerable. Despite the Empire's rigorous training and hierarchical structure, these disruptions caused panic in some units. Commanders struggled to maintain discipline, while soldiers on the decks of battleships began to fear that they were facing an enemy beyond calculation or control. Human adaptability was not limited to offensive tactics. They demonstrated remarkable resilience in defense. Damaged ships could recover quickly. Energy fields repaired themselves through rapid redistribution of power, and countermeasures neutralized many of the Empire's attacks. Terrans used the environment to their advantage, hiding ships behind asteroids, within energy clouds, or even using gravitational distortions to evade detection. Each engagement seemed to teach the humans something new, allowing them to improve their strategies in real time. The Empire, for all its preparation, was forced to react rather than act decisively. Despite the setbacks, the Empire refused to acknowledge the extent of the threat. Pride and hubris prevented any commander from admitting that the humans were formidable opponents. Orders continued to push the fleet deeper into Terran space, and the belief that victory was inevitable remained the official stance. Yet privately, officers recorded their concerns. Logs described confusion, frustration, and mounting fear among crews. Some even predicted that the campaign might not end as expected, though they dared not share these thoughts openly. As the days passed, the first major battle between the Empire and Terran forces occurred. It was supposed to be a demonstration of power, an easy victory to crush any hope of resistance. Instead, it became a wake-up call. The humans deployed their units with perfect timing, coordinating attacks and defenses in ways that the Empire had never encountered. Entire squadrons of the Empire's ships were forced into retreat, and several were lost entirely. The engagement lasted far longer than expected, and the results shook the confidence of both commanders and soldiers. Reports from the battle spread quickly through the fleet. While the Emperor remained publicly unshaken, whispers circulated among the officers about the humans' unexpected strength and ingenuity. Some began to speculate that the Terrans might possess technology or knowledge previously unknown to the galaxy. Others suggested that the humans' understanding of space itself, their ability to manipulate energy and navigation, made them uniquely dangerous. These discussions remained private, but they highlighted a growing awareness that the Empire had underestimated their opponent. The human forces did not stop at defense. They began to counterattack, using the anomalies in space to their advantage. Ships that the Empire believed were isolated were able to strike with devastating efficiency. Energy pulses disrupted engines, shields, and weapons in coordinated waves. The Empire's command structure was strained to the limit, as officers struggled to understand the methods behind the humans' actions. Every victory they had anticipated seemed out of reach, and every assumption about the Terrans' capabilities was challenged. By the end of the initial encounters, the Empire faced a sobering truth. The humans were not primitive. They were intelligent, adaptable, and capable of operating in ways that the Empire could barely anticipate. The warnings from scouts and the anomalies observed during the fleet's journey were not random or meaningless. They were indications of a civilization prepared to defend itself with creativity and strategy. For the first time, the Empire realized that arrogance and overconfidence could no longer guarantee success. Yet, even in the face of this realization, the Empire pressed on. Retreat was forbidden, and pride demanded perseverance. The commanders ordered further engagement, determined to find a weakness in the humans' defenses. Crews steeled themselves for the challenges ahead, aware that they were now in uncharted territory, facing an opponent that could match their strength in unexpected ways. The battles continued, and with each encounter, the humans revealed more of their capabilities, teaching the Empire a lesson that could not be ignored in Terran space. Intelligence, adaptability, and creativity were as powerful as any fleet or weapon. The Empire's arrogance had been shaken, but not yet broken. The humans had shown their strength, their ingenuity, and their ability to adapt. The fleet's journey had gone from confident conquest to cautious engagement. The first contact with Terran defenses had proven that victory would not come easily, and that the warnings once ignored were now a reality the Empire could no longer dismiss. The stage was set for a struggle unlike any the galaxy had seen, where the Empire would confront not just a civilization, but an intelligence and determination that challenged everything they believed about power and control. The Empire's struggle in Terran space deepened as days turned into weeks. What had started as a confident march into unknown territory had become a grueling series of confrontations, each more challenging than the last. The humans proved to be not just clever but relentless, forcing the Empire to rethink everything it had believed about strategy, technology, and superiority. Even the highest-ranking generals, who had never known doubt, found themselves questioning long-held assumptions. For the first time, the Empire realized that underestimating an opponent could come at a catastrophic cost. The Terrans. Tactics were unlike anything the Empire had faced before. They did not rely solely on brute force or massive fleets. Instead, they combined intelligence, adaptability, and deception to create unpredictable and highly effective defenses. Energy fields were deployed in shifting patterns, forcing Empire ships to constantly adjust course. Asteroid belts were manipulated with controlled gravitational pulses, creating traps for the fleet. Even the human smaller ships executed maneuvers that the Empire's officers had considered impossible, striking quickly and then disappearing before counterattacks could be coordinated. Every encounter seemed to teach the humans something new, and every lesson made the next battle even harder for the invaders. The Empire's fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, began to experience the strain of prolonged engagement. Supply lines, stretched thin across vast distances, struggled to keep pace with the fleet's movements. Fuel consumption was higher than expected due to constant evasive maneuvers and unexpected detours. Weapon systems required frequent maintenance after repeated exposure to Terran energy disruptions. Even the most disciplined crews found themselves exhausted. Fatigue and stress began to erode morale as soldiers realized that victory was no longer certain. Whispers of doubt spread through the ranks, though fear of the Emperor's wrath kept most from speaking openly. Within the Empire's command structure, tension escalated. Generals debated the next course of action in heated meetings, their voices rising over holographic maps and strategic projections. Some argued that the fleet should slow its advance and consolidate its forces, suggesting that reconnaissance and careful planning were essential to avoid further losses. Others insisted on pressing forward, believing that hesitation would only embolden the humans and allow them to strengthen their defenses. The arguments revealed a growing division among the high command, a dangerous fracture in what had always been a tightly controlled chain of authority. Meanwhile, the humans continued to exploit every weakness in the Empire's strategy. Small, fast-moving ships would appear in unexpected locations, striking critical systems and then retreating before the Empire could respond. Communications were frequently disrupted by energy pulses, making coordinated attacks nearly impossible. Sensor readings became unreliable in certain sectors, leaving commanders uncertain about the true position of their forces. Even advanced targeting systems failed under the humans' adaptive tactics, causing missed attacks and wasted ammunition. The Empire's previous advantage in technology was no longer guaranteed. For the first time, the humans could match or even outmaneuver them. The psychological impact on the fleet was profound. Soldiers who had trained for years to believe in the Empire's invincibility now faced the reality that they were not guaranteed victory. Panic and frustration crept in during moments of high stress. Officers found themselves forced to make split-second decisions without full confidence in their sensors or communications. The sense of control that had always defined the Empire's campaigns was slipping away. Crews began to rely not only on technology but also on intuition and improvisation, often in ways that had not been anticipated by command as the struggle continued. The Empire's losses became more significant. Ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and personnel casualties mounted. Entire squadrons that had once been considered elite were now rendered ineffective, their crews exhausted and demoralized. Despite the heavy losses, the Emperor refused to order a retreat, insisting that the fleet press on. Pride and the desire to maintain the image of invincibility overrode practical considerations. The message was clear. No matter the cost, the Empire would not yield the humans. Aware of the Empire's confidence and arrogance used it against them. They observed patterns in the fleet's movements, noting tendencies that could be exploited. By predicting likely courses of action, the Terrans were able to set ambushes, trap ships, and energy fields, and force the Empire into defensive positions. Each encounter revealed the humans' growing understanding of the Empire's strengths and weaknesses. The humans' resilience and creativity made them more than a simple opponent. They became a force that challenged the Empire's entire approach to warfare. Within the Empire, dissent began to emerge among the ranks. Some officers privately questioned the wisdom of continuing the campaign. They pointed to the anomalies, the adaptive strategies of the humans, and the increasing strain on resources as signs that the fleet was in danger. Others argued that such doubts were dangerous, that fear and hesitation could spread like a contagion and undermine the entire operation. These internal conflicts added another layer of difficulty for commanders, who now had to manage both external threats and the fragile morale of their own forces. The battle for control of Terran space became a test of endurance as much as strategy. The Empire's fleets moved carefully, attempting to navigate energy fields, gravitational distortions, and unexpected attacks. Repairs and resupply missions were risky, as even rear positions were not safe from sudden human interventions. Every victory required careful planning, yet even successful engagements came at a high cost. The humans seemed to anticipate and counter nearly every move, forcing the Empire to continually adapt on the fly. Despite these challenges, the Empire's officers refused to give in to despair. Training, discipline, and experience kept many units operational, even under intense pressure. Crews adapted, learning to trust both their instincts and limited sensor data. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged systems, often improvising solutions under fire. Tactical innovations emerged from necessity. As officers developed new formations and strategies to counter the humans' unpredictability, the struggle became not just a battle of firepower, but a test of ingenuity and resilience. The humans' approach also evolved during this phase. They began to use larger coordinated attacks, combining multiple small units to strike simultaneously at different parts of the Empire's fleet. Energy surges were timed to disable weapons and engines just as the human ships appeared in striking range. Defensive fields were repositioned dynamically, creating barriers that forced the Empire into disadvantageous positions. The humans' ability to learn from each encounter and adjust tactics quickly made them increasingly dangerous. The Empire, for all its planning, was constantly reacting rather than controlling the battle. In response to these challenges, the Empire's high command attempted new strategies. Fleets were reorganized into smaller, more flexible units, capable of responding quickly to human maneuvers. Reconnaissance missions were intensified, and sensor arrays were recalibrated to account for interference. Officers worked to anticipate human strategies by studying patterns in previous encounters. But the unpredictability of the humans remained a constant obstacle. Every plan was subject to rapid change as the humans adapted in real time, demonstrating a level of tactical intelligence the Empire had not expected. The strain on supply lines and logistics became increasingly critical. Fuel, ammunition, and food had to be transported over vast distances while avoiding areas of interference and attack. Convoys were often harassed by human units using rapid strikes, forcing the Empire to allocate resources to protect supplies instead of concentrating on offensive actions. Engineers and logisticians worked around the clock to keep the fleet operational, often improvising under dangerous conditions. The complexity of managing a vast fleet in such an unpredictable environment tested the Empire's organizational skills like never before. As the campaign dragged on, the psychological toll on the fleet became apparent. Soldiers and officers experienced fatigue, stress, and anxiety. Many realized that the humans were not only physically capable, but mentally resilient. The humans' ability to anticipate, adapt, and recover from setbacks impressed even the most skeptical officers. Morale fluctuated with every encounter, swinging between cautious optimism when a plan succeeded and deep concern when losses mounted or unexpected attacks occurred. The Empire's rigid hierarchy sometimes hindered rapid adaptation, making human flexibility an even greater advantage. The continuous struggle also highlighted the limits of technology. The Empire had relied heavily on advanced weapons, shields, and sensors to maintain superiority. But the humans' adaptive use of space, energy, and tactical ingenuity neutralized many of these advantages. Crews learned that reliance on machines alone was not enough. Human intuition, rapid decision-making, and creativity became essential for survival. Officers who could think flexibly and respond to unexpected developments were more successful than those who rigidly followed pre-established plans. The Empire had begun to understand that the Terrans were not a simple obstacle but a civilization, capable of challenging one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The humans' resilience, adaptability, tactical intelligence had turned what was expected to be a straightforward conquest into a prolonged struggle. Supply lines were strained, morale was tested, and the Empire's assumptions about superiority were shattered. The lesson was clear. Underestimating an opponent could be disastrous, and brute force alone was not sufficient to secure victory in Terran space. The struggle continued relentlessly. Each day brought new surprises, new tactics, and new challenges. The humans had transformed the battlefield into a place where intelligence, creativity, and adaptability mattered as much as firepower. The Empire, for all its experience and strength, was forced to acknowledge that it was facing a foe unlike any it had encountered before. The campaigns in Terran space became a crucible, testing the very limits of strategy, resilience, and leadership. The stage was set for the Empire to confront the full force of the humans' ingenuity and determination. And the outcome of the conflict remained uncertain. The final phase of the Empire's campaign in Terran space brought a reckoning that no one aboard the fleet could have fully anticipated. After weeks of grueling engagements, constant adaptation, and unexpected losses, the Empire had learned a harsh lesson. Terran space was not a land to be conquered easily, and the humans were far more capable than they had ever imagined. The fleet, once brimming with confidence and arrogance, now faced the reality of defeat, not through a single overwhelming blow, but through relentless, precise, and intelligent resistance. The humans had mastered the art of anticipation. They had observed the Empire's patterns, predicting the fleet's strategies and exploiting weaknesses at every turn. Where the Empire had relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid formations, the humans relied on speed, adaptability, and deception. The entire fleets found themselves trapped in energy fields that drained power from engines and weapons. While smaller human ships executed rapid strikes on vulnerable points before vanishing into the shadows of space, the result was frustration, confusion, and mounting losses for the Empire. No longer could the High Command rely on pre-programmed tactics or superior numbers. The humans had forced them to react constantly, and the constant pressure wore down even the most seasoned officers. The Emperor's pride became both a strength and a weakness during this phase. Publicly, he remained confident, insisting that the fleet press forward and that victory was still within reach. Privately, however, the losses and the humans' unexpected abilities created unease among even his closest advisors. Suggestions for retreat, reorganization, or negotiation were quickly dismissed, seen as signs of weakness or cowardice. The Emperor demanded persistence, and the fleet obeyed, but the costs were mounting. Supply lines were stretched to their limits. Ships required constant repairs, and morale among the crews was fraying. Exhaustion became as much an enemy as the humans themselves. The humans continued to demonstrate ingenuity and coordination on a scale that astounded the Empire. They established defensive grids that could adapt dynamically to fleet movements, shifting energy barriers and deploying tactical units in precise calculated patterns. Ambushes became increasingly sophisticated, with multiple small forces striking simultaneously from unexpected directions. Even when an Empire commander thought they had anticipated a maneuver, the humans would adjust mid-action, forcing ships into disadvantageous positions or isolating them from the main fleet. These tactics were not simply clever, they were evidence of a civilization capable of thinking several steps ahead, analyzing and reacting faster than the Empire could adapt. Engineers and pilots aboard the Empire's ships were pushed to their limits. Systems designed for superior performance began to falter under constant strain. Shields fluctuated, weapons overheated, and engines required frequent recalibration. Crews worked tirelessly to keep ships operational, often improvising repairs while under attack. Many soldiers had expected a simple campaign, but instead faced continuous challenges that demanded both technical skill and ingenuity. The human forces, it seemed, were testing every weakness and exploiting every opportunity. Even the most advanced technology could not guarantee safety. The psychological toll on the Empire's personnel grew more severe with each engagement. Soldiers who had boarded ships with confidence now faced fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion. Officers had to balance the demands of command with the morale of their crews, all while grappling with the realization that the humans were capable of unpredictable, highly effective strategies. Rumors circulated about entire squadrons being ambushed and destroyed without warning, stories that sowed anxiety throughout the fleet. The sense of control that had once defined the Empire's campaigns was slipping away, replaced by the knowledge that they were facing an enemy who could not be easily measured or anticipated. Terran forces were not merely defensive. They were also calculating, proactive, and relentless. They continued to exploit every mistake and every gap in the Empire's strategy. Even when the Empire attempted to reorganize, the humans anticipated and countered these efforts, striking at isolated units or cutting off supply lines. Energy surges disrupted sensors and communications, forcing commanders to rely on intuition and improvisation. Crews adapted, learning to expect unpredictability and to react quickly. But the cumulative stress of these engagements took a visible toll. Ships were damaged or lost, and the fleet's once pristine formations became scattered and irregular. The Empire began to realize that their previous victories in other campaigns had been achieved against predictable foes. Terran strategy was fluid, adaptable, and capable of learning in real time. The humans could analyze engagements, exploit patterns, and counter even advanced technology effectively. For the first time, the Empire faced an opponent that was not simply weaker or slower. It was smarter, faster, and more creative. This revelation shook the confidence of officers at all levels, even those who had believed themselves invincible. The arrogance that had carried them into Terran space now became a liability, blinding them to the full scope of the challenge. Despite mounting setbacks, the Empire refused to retreat. Pride, reputation, and fear of public perception forced them to continue pressing forward. Every encounter, every skirmish, every loss only hardened the resolve of the High Command to maintain dominance. Soldiers understood that survival depended not only on skill, but also on endurance and resilience. Crews learned to operate under extreme stress, improvising solutions, adapting to anomalies, and developing creative tactics to counter the humans' unpredictable strategies. The struggle became a test of stamina and determination as much as of firepower. The humans' ability to adapt grew more impressive with each engagement. They observed the Empire's strengths and weaknesses, adjusting energy fields, defensive formations, and attack patterns in real time. Coordinated strikes targeted critical points in the fleet, exploiting gaps and weaknesses that might have been invisible to less intelligent opponents. Even the Empire's elite ships were vulnerable when faced with the humans' clever maneuvers. Every engagement taught the humans something new, allowing them to anticipate the Empire's actions and respond with precision. The fleet, once confident and commanding, was now forced into reactive strategies. Constantly responding to a foe that seemed always one step ahead, the loss of resources became a critical concern. Supply lines were constantly harassed by human forces, forcing the Empire to divert personnel and ships to protect essential deliveries. Fuel shortages, weapons depletion, and maintenance backlogs began to limit operational capabilities. Even with careful planning, the cumulative impact of constant engagements wore down the fleet's efficiency. Crews were exhausted, and the strain affected both decision-making and morale. Every maneuver required careful calculation, as mistakes could result in significant losses. In the midst of this struggle, the Empire began to reflect on the warnings it had once ignored. Scouts and advisors had attempted to convey the dangers of Terran space, describing anomalies, strange energy fields, and signs of intelligence long before the fleet arrived. Those warnings, dismissed as exaggerations or irrelevant noise, now seemed prophetic. Officers privately acknowledged that ignoring these early signals had been a grave error. But the Emperor's pride prevented any public acknowledgement. The Empire's inability to heed early intelligence had brought them to the brink of failure. The humans' resilience was as remarkable as their strategy. Ships that had been damaged or temporarily disabled often returned to action, repaired, and repositioned for maximum effect. Energy fields were recalibrated on the fly, and countermeasures adapted to the Empire's attacks. Every loss for the humans was an opportunity to learn, while every mistake by the Empire provided them with new insights. The humans' ability to endure, adapt, and strike with precision transformed the conflict into a protracted struggle, testing the Empire's capacity for patience, adaptation, and humility. As the weeks progressed, the Empire faced an undeniable truth. Their initial assumptions had been wrong. Terrans were not a primitive civilization. They were intelligent, resourceful, and capable of challenging one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. Victory was no longer guaranteed by sheer numbers or technology alone. The fleet had to rely on ingenuity, improvisation, and rapid adaptation to survive. Even then, the humans' continued resistance made every advance costly and uncertain. The Empire had underestimated the very beings they had intended to dominate, and the consequences were now evident in the losses' confusion, an exhaustion that permeated the fleet. Ultimately, the Empire was forced to consider retreat. The fleet, though still formidable, had suffered heavy losses and faced a human opponent that could consistently challenge and outmaneuver them. The strategic position had become untenable, with supply lines threatened, crews fatigued, ships damaged beyond quick repair. The realization that persistence would only lead to further disaster forced the High Command to make the painful decision to withdraw from Terran space. It was a decision born of necessity, not pride, and marked a rare moment of humility for the Empire. The retreat was cautious and calculated. Fleets moved in formation, protecting vulnerable units while attempting to maintain order. The humans did not simply allow them to leave. They continued to harass, testing the Empire's ability to respond under pressure. Despite this, the Empire managed to extricate most of its forces, though at a high cost. The campaign had inflicted significant losses, and the Emperor himself faced the sobering reality that arrogance and overconfidence had brought the fleet to the brink of defeat. Back on Terran space, the humans celebrated their success. Their strategies had not only defended their systems, but had demonstrated a level of intelligence and resilience that left the galaxy in awe. They had faced one of the most powerful empires and had forced it to retreat. The humans' ability to anticipate, adapt, and endure had turned the tide, proving that intellect, creativity, and courage could match and even surpass sheer might. Terran space became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most powerful forces could be challenged by determination and strategy. The Empire, meanwhile, was left to reflect on the lessons learned. Ignoring warnings, underestimating an opponent, and relying solely on brute force had led to near disaster. The campaign had exposed weaknesses in strategy, logistics, and leadership, and had forced the Empire to confront the limits of its technology and assumptions. For all its power, the Empire had been humbled by a civilization it had assumed would be easily dominated. The lesson was clear. Intelligence, adaptability, and preparation were as critical to survival and victory as any weapon or fleet. The humans' victory, though not without cost, reshaped the balance of power in the region. They had defended their home, preserved their systems, and forced one of the galaxy's mightiest empires to retreat. The story of their resilience spread quickly, a testament to the importance of vigilance, ingenuity, and courage. For the Empire, it was a lesson in humility, a reminder that the universe was full of unknown challenges, and that arrogance could never substitute for respect and preparation. The campaign ended with both sides changed. The humans had proven themselves capable of facing the galaxy's greatest threat, while the Empire had learned that power alone was not enough. The warnings that had been ignored were validated, and the consequences of dismissal had been costly. Terran space remained a place of mystery and strength, a region that no empire could enter without caution. The encounter left a lasting mark on the Empire's leadership, shaping future strategies and instilling a wary respect for the intelligence and determination of those they had once underestimated.